Hi, welcome to my next video. This time I wanted to show you how I made this illustration using waterproof inks made by Kakimori. First, let me introduce you to the Kakimori store in Tokyo. When we still lived in the center of Tokyo near to the Kiyosumi Japanese Gardens, I used to use the Kakimori store as a target for my walks because it was in just the right distance for me to walk there, buy something interesting and browse the store, and then go back on foot also. The store is not only awesome because they are selling a lot of interesting writing supplies and kind of designer writing supplies, but also because they have their own original products that you cannot buy anywhere else, and mainly the Kakimori waterproof pigment ink series. They make all kinds of colors of pigment waterproof ink, which is meant for fountain pens, but it's really interesting for me because I can use it in my art in many ways. Kakimori sells a collection of base colors and also pre-mixed colors, so similar what you have with watercolors. And you can buy those inks in smaller or bigger bottles, or on site you can also mix your own ink in the ink bar, so you can make an original ink from the base colors and take it home with you. I bought some base colors and some pre-mixed colors too, but what's most exciting about these inks for me is that all of them are waterproof. So here I made an example about what it means. With watercolors, if you try to put a color on top of a wash, especially darker one that's already there, you will reactivate the pigment and the colors will blend and destroy your wash. But with waterproof inks, you can do something like this without destroying the washes that are already there at all. This is a very exciting property for me. I'm used to using watercolors where I have to be really careful and thoughtful about the order in which I paint. And this makes painting things like city scenes and buildings a bit bothersome because even though I know what has to be in the picture, I have to figure out, for example, the shadows and the lighting beforehand, before just painting all the details, because I have to know how everything will look in the end. Here with waterproof inks, I can paint all the details before adding the shadows. I can add the shadows in the end, for example, as I will do in this picture. And there are other ways of using these inks also, that not only shadows, that can use this property. I think these inks would be perfect, for example, to color cartoons, to color comics, because you could color the characters or the buildings with colors that you know that characters have, and then add shadows on top of these. So I think that the pictures that are made up as you go, so concept arts, comics, maybe things like that, like sketches, would benefit from using these kind of inks, because you don't have to know everything from the start. You don't have to think ahead so much as you would have to with watercolors. Here I can, when sketching a building, for example, paint some details, paint the colors of the building, and then decide, okay, I'll use the shadow, I'll drop the shadow here from this side, and this side will be in light, so I'll just leave it as it is. And I can paint the shadow on top of the details. With watercolors, I would have to decide this first, and I would have to know which side is dark, which side is light, where I have to leave some places, what is the exact order of painting. But these inks are a bit more forgiving. So overall, I think these inks just make painting a bit more free, less bothersome, and less bound by the order of just putting layers on the paper. Of course, it has some downsides. Compared to watercolors, you cannot lift the paint at all. So once you paint something, it's there and it's completely waterproof. So even if you put some water on it and scrub with your brush, you will not lift the paint at all. So any mistakes, especially of dark color, are really visible. So that's the downside. Also, I don't really know how lightproof these inks are. I asked and they told me that these are made from the same pigments that are used for professional paints. But I still don't have any concrete data about how well these fare in professional kind of display. If you display work that's made with these inks, how long it will last. I expect that it's about the same as professional watercolors because of the pigment, but I don't know. I don't have any data, so that's a bit of a problem, especially if I want to sell the original later, for example. But here I'm making just an illustration that will be published in a magazine that's about writing tools and art tools, mostly fountain pens, that I'm writing an article in about these inks. So this is like a demo piece for painting with Kakimori inks that I did for this magazine. And I did it because these inks are primarily sold as fountain pen inks, but I think they are really nice to use as just watercolors. These are technically really similar to use to watercolors. I just have a ceramic palette with small wells in it where I can put many colors of these inks, just few drops in each well, and then on a second palette I can mix these colors together and produce colors in the similar way as I do with watercolors. The only thing is that if you let these drops dry, you will not be able to re-wet them, so the ink that you will not use for this picture will go to waste. So you just have to use few drops at a time. Fortunately, the ink is quite concentrated, so even few drops can be enough for a picture like this, for example. The other good thing is that these inks are pigment-based, so the colors don't get weird when you dilute them. In inks that are based on dyes, I tried to paint with them in some of my pictures on my channel. When you dilute them with water, dye-based inks tend to devolve into some base colors. So for example, a red color can turn orangish pink, or a blue color can turn pink, or a green color can turn violet or something like this, because these inks are not meant to be used diluted. But here with the Kakimori pigment-based inks, I haven't had anything like this happen, and they mix and dilute just as you would expect from watercolors, for example, which is great. But you can do something like this. So I can put a dark, intensive, wet shadow wash on details that are also dark and quite pronounced, and nothing happens. So just nothing blends, nothing blurs. I can put a shadow on details and the details just stay there and they're nice and sharp. I really like this because it's something that I do sometimes when I paint digitally. I would do the base colors of a thing and then put the shadows on top of it, because I kind of decide where the shadow has to go while I'm painting, while I'm just imagining the scene. So it gives me this freedom of experimenting with a picture without just having to decide everything from the start, which is great. I really want to try to use these inks more, especially in sketches, like watercolor-like sketches, concept art sketches, because they give me the freedom of just painting the colors first and the shadow last, or the shadow first and the details last. So I have more freedom, which I don't have with watercolors. And of course here I also used this property in this picture. I'm just painting a street corner that's actually near the Kakimori store. I just made a photo of a random street corner that I liked, and I was able to focus first on all the details of the building and the signs and the plants, and then add the shadow at the end. I have to say that I quite enjoy this kind of a process. Okay, that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. As always, feel free to comment, share and subscribe, and you can also support me on Patreon. It's your support on Patreon that allows me to do these videos. Okay, see you in the next one. Bye.